a real commitment for him to come and join us. He was recommended to me by the AAUP, American Association of University Professors at Tennessee Tech, because of his commitment, enthusiasm, devotion, going all around the state, encouraging people who are concerned about how do you teach in the environment that's going on in our state with integrity, etc. And here's David, and he's here to let us know.
Well, thank you, Barber. Thank you for inviting me, and thank all of you for coming out. When I teach in a classroom, I have a lecture format, and the lecture format usually consists of PowerPoint slides which present the kind of evidence that I want the students to see, and I'll talk about whatever it is that's on the slide and then move on. And so I prepared a similar kind of a presentation today. I'm going to give that presentation, but in a much abbreviated form. Instead of doing what I usually do, which is spend a lot of time talking about what each slide means, I'm going to present the slides as briefly as I can to give you the information that's on the slide, because the information is important. But the most important thing that I think I would like us to do today is to have a conversation. And the conversation that I would like to have, I kind of introduce with the title for the presentation, The White Supremacist Censorship of Education in Tennessee. It's not a term that is a friendly term, the white supremacist censorship. It's not a term that we commonly use. But I think it is an accurate term. And so in the first place, I want to talk about that very briefly. Back in 2021, when the first of the divisive concept laws were passed, how many people are familiar with the term divisive concept? All right, so you may be more familiar with the original incarnation of these laws. Tennessee has passed one in 2021 affecting K-12 education, and that one was passed under the headline of "Critical Race Theory Has Entered Our Schools." The anti-critical race theory laws are now called divisive concept laws. In 2022, the first of the higher education versions of the law was passed. In 2023, a second of those laws was passed, and this last week, the governor signed the third amendment to these laws, each one making the possibility of really censoring higher education in our state. And I say the possibility of censoring higher education in our state is inaccurate, because it's already happening. It's already happening in that there is a chill in the air, and faculty on campuses are scared to touch the law. So if we want to talk about freedom of speech, it's already been abridged by these laws. And on my own campus, I was part of a group, a small student group. I was a faculty advisor to a small student group called People for Black History. And we organized a petition campaign on our campus to demand that our faculty senate, the faculty leadership body, demand that the faculty senate condemn these divisive concept laws. And in the very first meeting that I attended of a faculty senate committee, we presented our resolution as condemning the white supremacist education laws in Tennessee. Unacceptable. White supremacy, if we say white supremacy, they're going to come down on us. So already, immediately, freedom of speech has been abridged by these laws. That's absolute. But I said I was going to try to be brief so that we could talk, and so I'm going to try to move up. The first thing that I want to say is these laws themselves are part, and I know that I don't need to explain this. I know that I don't need to say this. These laws themselves are part of a much wider attack, assault that is happening today, a right-wing assault. I hope everyone was paying attention to Trump's presentation to the Supreme Court. His lawyer, what did his lawyer say? His lawyer said, if the President of the United States orders the assassination of a political rival, that would be okay. He would have immunity from prosecution for doing that. It's kind of scary. And so what I would like to do is put the conversation that we are going to have today on that ground. That's the ground. In Tennessee, of course, we've had, let me see if I can figure out how to work this. Oh, okay. In Tennessee, there's been all sorts of laws that have been passed, and I put up some of the, at least two of the less obvious laws that have been passed that are part of this wave of repressive and right-wing legislation. The one that I wanted to really point out to you is the one up there on the right, because many people had not even heard of that. Tennessee lawmakers redirect maternal health funds to crisis pregnancy centers. The governor had asked for Tennessee, I don't know if you're aware of it, Tennessee, I think, has the third worst maternal mortality rate in the United States. And so the governor of Tennessee asked for a pittance, $3 million for maternity health care. The legislature said, we'll give the $3 million, but not to maternal health, but to these phony abortion advisory centers that are all over the state. You know what I'm talking about? Everybody knows what I'm talking about, yeah. And then the TSU, another terrible thing that has just happened. The popular story, the story that my faculty senate president recently recited in front of the faculty senate was that there was mismanagement of the money that TSU had been granted. And so therefore, we wipe out the board and we're going to put an entirely new board of trustees in at our sole public HBCU, historically black college and university. The story of that mismanaged money is this, that, as you may know, I hope everyone knows this, that over the last 30 years, the state of Tennessee has shortchanged Tennessee State University to the tune of $2.1 billion with a B, billion with a B, dollars, shortchanged the TSU. And so they began to finally eke out a little bit of that money to the Tennessee State University Board of Trustees, and Tennessee State University used that money to get as many students as quickly as they could onto their campus, into their programs. No way that you're going to make up 30 years of denying education to young black people. No way you're going to do that. And so they want to get as many people as quickly as possible into their school. They don't have the dorm space. They have to rent hotel space, motel space. That's the crime that the TSU board committed. Let's see if I can. Oh, it happens.
My eyesight is poor. It's the best I can. I would have to sit up there. I'm okay.
I want to talk about the origin of these laws first and briefly. The origin of these laws, the divisive concept laws, the anti-critical race theory laws, is right here in the tremendous protest movement that erupted with the murder of George Floyd. Just some photo. Am I pointing in the right way? Which direction? Yeah, okay, that's why. I think. There.
Both ways work.
I think both ways work.
Really well.
Yeah.
The estimate is that between 15 million and 26 million people participated in these demonstrations. And this map that you see there is all the places where, I can't remember what the number is, I think it's 100 or more people participated in demonstrations. Or even in my Sleepy Martin, Tennessee, we had 100 people at the height of this thing. But what was frightening to the people who, to the people who run this country, what was frightening to the people who run this country was that it was not just black people. It was white people, it was Native American people, it was every race, sex, gender, any kind of combination you want to put, everybody was there. And that was frightening. In the course of these demonstrations, corporations, major corporations, but also on a popular level, the cry of systemic racism was put forward. And that's what was especially frightening, because it suggested to the people who run this country that more and more people were coming to understand how this country really operates.
That's new.
Trump praises great police, rebuffing protests over systemic racism. Barr says no systemic racism. An awakening in America is prying at racism's grip. There we go. This is a search term for the term systemic racism, that's blue, and critical race theory, that's red. And so you see that at the time of George Floyd's murder, systemic racism becomes an important term that appears in the news, on the internet, and wherever. Shortly after that, a young man named Christopher Rufo. Anybody heard this man's name, Rufo? You've heard Rufo's name. Rufo is now a trustee in Florida. What's his name? DeSantis appointed him a trustee of, I think it was the new college, the alternative college, and they stripped that college of everything that it was worthwhile. Christopher Rufo is the man who said, this is critical race theory running. He used the term critical race theory because he didn't want to use the term systemic racism. He wanted to confuse the issue. He wanted to make the issue not an understanding, give people not an understanding of how this country really functions, but throw dust in people's eyes. Critical race theory. And so the first blip in critical race theory is when Rufo raises the question on Fox News. What's his name? What's the first name then? Donald Trump. Donald Trump watched Christopher Rufo testifying on Fox News, and within a week or two produced an executive order, which is the template for all the divisive concept laws. I just want to back up a second. And talk about the origin of the term. The origin of the term systemic racism. Back in 1967, and I guess a few of the people in this sanctuary remember Stokely Carmichael. Stokely was the man who, of course, raised the slogan of Black Power. And in 1960, and that was in 66. In 1967, he authored a book with a sociologist named Charles Hamilton, and the name of the book was Black Power. In that book, Stokely puts forward the first definition of institutional racism. Today, I don't differentiate. There are some people who say, oh, that's different than systemic. This is the first definition of systemic racism. Martin Luther King at the time called it structural racism. But this is where the concept begins with Stokely and his definition of institutional racism. Basically what Stokely says is, look, if some Ku Klux Klansmen murder 5 children in a church in Birmingham, Alabama, we remember that. If some racists murder 5 children in a church in Birmingham, Alabama, well, that's an act of individual racism. But if in the same city, Birmingham, Alabama, 500 children die before they reach 5 years of age, infant mortality, that's institutional racism. And that's the important thing that we need to understand. Back in 1967, Martin Luther King, in his last book, and if you have not read Martin Luther King, any of Martin Luther King's books, start with his last book. The last book is called Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? In that book, Martin Luther King puts forward a mathematical formula for what it means to be black in American society. And he says, black Americans are 50% Americans. In all the good things in life, they have half. In all the bad things in life, they have double. Double the infant mortality rate, double the maternal mortality rate, double the unemployment, double the poverty, and so on, right on down the line. That was America in the year 1967. And those statistics have not changed. In 1967, that was the waning days of the system of segregation, which was an overtly white supremacist system. You can Google it yourself. I encourage everybody to do it. Google it. See if I'm lying here. On virtually every index of life in America, black people have double the bad. We live, I want to talk about this more at the conclusion of my talk, but we live in a white supremacist society. That is a difficult thing. For the first time I said it to myself, it was shocking. It was shocking to me. We live in a white supremacist society. Black people continue to have double the problems that white people have. And that's not to say that white people don't have problems. We have tremendous problems and tremendous insecurities. But all those insecurities begin with our condoning of the condition that black people face. Condoning in not actively opposing. It's not saying this is a scandal that the maternal mortality rate of black women is twice that of white women. I want to talk about the divisive concept. I think that's what the next slide is. Here are the divisive concept laws. This is from the 2022 law. That's right, yes, the 2022 law on higher education. The 2022 law on higher education lists 16 divisive concepts. The 2021 law, which is a K-12 law, lists 14. The first 14 of these 16 are identical to the K-12 law. But let me just run through this quickly. The first divisive concept, one race or sex is inherently superior or inferior to. Sounds good. You're not allowed to say that. This is what I call the camouflage, one of the camouflage parts of the law. Of course, the reality is that as recently as 60 years ago in the state of Tennessee, one race was superior to another and was explicitly stated to be. Two, an individual by virtue of the individual's race or sex is inherently privileged. I'm not a fan of the term white privilege. I'm not a fan of the term. And I'm not a fan of the term because although I think it reflects something real, it inadequately reflects the reality. But it still reflects a reality. And the reality is the reality that I gave you a few minutes ago. That in all the bad things in life, black people have double. The terrible insecurities that white people in our society face. In West Tennessee, where I live, I don't know what it's like here. I don't think it's that different, but there are a heck of a lot of poor people where I live, poor white people where I live. My county is Weakley County, 90% white. 25% of our county is on, 25% of the children in the school are on free or reduced lunches. 20% of the population in Weakley County is on food stamps. And yet, this overwhelmingly poor white population, I think the median income is $20,000 a year less than the national median income, Weakley County. And that's white people. We're $10,000 less than the Tennessee median income. Those people vote for Donald Trump, and they vote for congressmen whose principal platform is guns and cutting food stamps. Having said that, still true. Privilege is real. Privilege is a reality. And we're not allowed to talk about it. I'm going to skip down E. An individual, by virtue of the individual's race or sex, bears responsibility for actions committed in the past by other members of the same race or sex. I gotta confess, it is of course impossible for any of us to change the past, to have the past, our ancestors, our predecessors, do something other than what they did. That's absolutely, what is also true, however, is this. That the ill-gotten gains of 250 years of slavery and 100 years of segregation, we, white people, have to a greater or lesser degree inherited the benefits of that, and black people have inherited the deficits of that. I use the example of if my father steals something of tremendous value from your father, and your father spends his life trying to get it back but never gets it back, and my father holds on to it, and they both die. I inherit the theft, and you inherit the poverty. We are responsible not for what they did, but for the results of what they did, the consequences of what they did. We are responsible for that. F, an individual should feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or another form of psychological distress solely because of the individual's race or sex. This is a catch-all. The law also says this. We're not part of the camouflage. We're not talking about you can't teach stuff. You just have to present an impartial view of the material that you present. An impartial view of a lynching. You present the perspective of the black person, the victim, and you present the perspective of those noble defenders of white women's purity.
And what you're referring to is the 2022 Tennessee law?
2021 and 2022. The 2022 is the first one affecting higher education. The 2023 amends that. If you're interested later, I can talk about what each of these amendments mean. The short story of what each amendment to the law means is, here's another plank in the gallows that are being constructed for higher education. G, a meritocracy is inherently racist or sexist. A meritocracy. People, what is a meritocracy? Meritocracy is what? People in American society rise to that level that they are skilled for, or have the talent for, or what have you. Looking at, so you're not allowed to say, in a K-12 school, if you say today, the United States is not a meritocracy, you will be fired. You can be fired. I shouldn't say you will be, because the way the law works is there's got to be some kind of complaint. But if there is a complaint, you can be fired for saying that the United States is not a meritocracy. And so if it's not a meritocracy, and we look at the condition that black people live in this society, Native American people live in this society, well, that's what they deserve. They're just not skilled enough. They're not intelligent enough. this state or the United States is fundamentally or irredeemably racist or sexist. To me, this is the most important of the divisive concepts. And again, it's something that probably, at times I have actually said, I'm grateful that these laws have been passed because they've helped me clarify my own thinking. I would never have, and I doubt very much that there are many, if any, teachers in the state of Tennessee, K-12 or higher education, who would say, well, the United States is fundamentally racist. But as I gave thought to it, I came to the conclusion, well, yes, it is. We are a racist society. We are a white supremacist society. And the reason that most of us don't recognize it is because if we recognize it, we've got to do something about it. The fact of the matter is this. I like Stokely's term institutional racism. And I like it for this reason. That for the first 350 years of American society's history, of our country's history, virtually every single institution that arose in a manner that justified and enabled the white supremacy of the society in which it arose. The DNA of almost every institution in American society today traces back to those early institutions and continues to promote the same kind of outcomes, 50% formula, and most important of all, the same kind of values. I think a lot about values. Martin Luther King, in that same book I recommend, some of you, anybody here remember Martin Luther King's speech at Riverside Church in 1967?
He was against the Vietnam War.
Against the Vietnam War, yes. And in that was the critical point. He came out against the Vietnam War. All the newspapers, many of the civil rights leaders condemned Martin Luther King for coming out against the war. One of the things he said in that speech, in which he also says in the book that I'm recommending, is this country needs a radical revolution of values. Let me say what I think that means. What I think that means is that we accommodate. I see this on my own campus. When the first anti-critical race theory law was passed back in the spring of 2021, in the fall, it was the end of the semester. The first meeting that my department had was in the fall of that semester, following the passage of that law. And I went to my department and I said, hey, this is the law that the American Historical Association, which we're all members of, says the clear goal of the law is to suppress the teaching and learning of the role of racism in American history. I said, we're historians. We should say something about this. one of my of course that one of my colleagues answered, well, if our department said anything about this, it would be like putting a target on our backs. It took me a while. I wish that, I'm not a quick thinker. It took me 2 or 3 years to come up with the right answer, but I did come up, and I told him when I came up with it. He ignored it.
What was it?
I'm going to give it to you. Wait a second, I'm going to take a drink because it's a dramatic moment. Some people are born with targets on their back. And so the value that we place on our position, on our jobs, transcends the fact that many people don't have that choice. I think, I was expecting a conversation. I was expecting some, not a conversation so much as some response when I said America, our country is a white supremacist country. And I saw agreement. And so I was prepared for it. But that's the conversation that I think we all need to be having. If it's true that this is a white supremacist society, what do we need to do to change it? What do we need to do to change the values of this society? Such that my job is more important than the life of other people. In the newsletter that Barber showed me for advertising this talk today, she said I would have some easy things that we could do. And I don't think really challenging the white supremacy of American society is something that's easy. I think it's hard, and I think that I think it takes thought. It's not just writing a letter, although that can be part of it. I have one concrete thing that I think would be important, and I know everybody here, this is not something that's easy for people our age. But on July 8th, how many people saw I know Barbara saw it. Did anyone here see the webinar that our coalition presented on Matthew Hahn? Does that name ring a bell? Matthew Hahn was a K-12 teacher in Sullivan County. It's all the way over in East Tennessee. He grew up in that county. He taught high school in that county for 16 years. He was a very popular teacher.
What was his name, please?
Matthew Hahn, H-A-W-N. He was a very popular teacher. He brought he had a class called Contemporary Issues. What are you supposed to talk about in a class called Contemporary? One would hope you would talk about contemporary issues. He brought an article by Ta-Nehisi Coates. Everybody familiar with it? Yeah. All right. And a poem, and I'm sorry I forget the name of the young woman who wrote the poem. It was a YouTube poem, a spoken word kind of thing, about privilege, about white privilege. And he was fired. He was fired. This was on the same day that the governor signed the law affecting K-12. He was fired for teaching this outrageous insight into racism and the nature of privilege. On July 8th, he has yet another hearing in Kingsport, Tennessee. I don't know what your affiliation with the church is, and I don't even know if, but lots of churches have church buses. I don't know, you don't all have a church bus? Oh, well.
Weekend places, go ahead.
We're going to do something on July 8th. We're going to have a demonstration on July 8th. We don't know the details yet. We're still working out the details. But to me, to have a strong presence at a hearing, for this, I forgot to mention, Matthew Hahn is type 1 diabetic. Right now, he is surviving on GoFundMe. It would be a very powerful thing if we could get 100 people to Kingsport, Tennessee on July 8th and demonstrate our opposition to these white supremacist laws on the one hand and our support for a man who had the integrity. He was warned in advance. He was warned in advance. You can't teach this stuff, and he taught it anyway. It was at the time that George Floyd was killed. I'm sorry, not the time that George Floyd was killed. It was the time that Derek Chauvin was on trial, and he taught it anyway. And we need to support those kind of people who are willing to stand up and say, no, this is outrageous. We can't censor education. I think that's it, ladies and gentlemen.
Say a little bit about the impact on university professors.
As I said, well, I'll give you one concrete example. I'll give you a few concrete examples. In the spring of 2022, the first of the divisive concept laws affecting higher education was passed. And in the fall of 2022, the faculty, 24 faculty at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, UTK, agreed that they would, on a Tuesday and a Wednesday, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, remember it, Monday, Wednesday, Friday classes, and Tuesday, Thursday classes. So we're going to get both ends, Tuesday and a Wednesday. Every one of their Tuesday classes, every one of their Wednesday classes, before they start the class, they read a statement about these divisive concept laws. And then on one of those nights, the Tuesday, the Wednesday, they had an open event in which they discussed it. So that was the first action of any faculty anywhere in the state. On my campus, in the spring of last year, we did manage to pass a resolution. It wasn't the resolution that we had originally proposed. It was a slightly watered down version of the law. That was the second of the actions. I'm sorry, UTK also passed a resolution in that fall of 2022. We were very excited. We wanted to work together with faculty on other campuses across the state, create a faculty-wide resistance to these laws. UTK, not interested, couldn't do it. In fact, they were going to do a divisive concept day, just like the one they did in the fall of 2022. They were going to do one in the fall of, oh no, this spring they were going to do another one, and on legal advice, they did not do it. On my own campus, on April 25th, I know the day well, on April 25th, 2023, the faculty senate, our faculty senate, passed the watered down resolution, and 3 days later, the 2023 law was signed by the governor. I immediately wrote to the faculty senate president and vice president saying, hey, you just passed a resolution condemning these divisive concept laws, and now the governor has signed yet another version of the law, one which makes it much easier to file a complaint against a faculty member who's accused of teaching one of these divisive concepts. Don't you think you should do something? No, we're not going to do anything about it. The University Tennessee Council has advised us freedom of speech and freedom and academic freedom are guaranteed. Although it is absolutely true that the 2023 law made it much easier to file a complaint against a faculty, they did nothing.
What about tenure? Does that protect faculty in Tennessee?
We have in Tennessee something called post-tenure review, and it is unclear to me. Originally, I don't know if you guys remember University of Tennessee president Joe DiPietro. This a bunch of years ago, about 8 years ago, I think. Joe DiPietro put up a trial balloon, and the trial balloon was, let's talk about a mechanism that we can get rid of tenured professors. And there was such a strong feedback against that, they withdrew that, but they put forward this post-tenure review. And the post-tenure review, again, it's very unclear, it's ambiguous, and in my mind, ambiguity means that they can get what they want. That's what I think. But, nobody has lost tenure yet. You may be looking at one of the first.
And when you mentioned that your faculty senate chose not to act and rather to say, well, we have freedom of speech, is that within the HBCU and the majority black faculty?
Would you repeat the question as you give the answer? Because some of us can't hear the questions.
So I'm asking if he was referring to the faculty senate that chose not to act after this last iteration of the law, and the legal counsel's advice was, it's okay, you have freedom of speech, let's lay low. Was that within the HBCU Senate faculty with majority black?
No. The advice to protect freedom of speech by saying nothing, that advice was the University of Tennessee system. The Tennessee State University is under a separate board. But yes, the law affects, I don't know what they are doing at Tennessee State University. I've tried to find out, but I've been unable to find out. But to continue answering about the faculty, we've been trying since last fall to pull together faculty across the state in opposition to the divisive concept laws. And we have about 10,000 public university faculty in the state of Tennessee. In our coalition, which is the only coalition that is aimed at defeating these divisive concept laws, we have 5 faculty members. And why? And why? Because people are scared. I should say, not only either people are scared or they don't care, or they support. And there are people who do support these laws. There are faculty members who do support these laws.
Well, first of all, I should be good. I've got my teacher voice. But you've got 6 now. I teach at Pellissippi State. And so I will get in contact with you and join that.
Wonderful.
But my question is, can you go a little more into the differences the 2023 one did? Because we were told you can say whatever you want in the classroom. You just can't make students
Okay.
answer a question that says something against theirs. But you can say it as long as you're not forcing them to agree with it.
Okay. Thanks. I wanted that opportunity. The 2022 law says that a student who feels like he's been made to conform to a divisive concept can complain in a, quote, court of competent jurisdiction. The only thing that I think was possible under that law is that a student could come and complain in the court of competent jurisdiction that the teacher gave me a B because I would not conform to what he was teaching. And so the only thing the school could do would be to change the grade. The 2023, and by the way, anyone who's interested, I can refer you to the way our Tennessee State Legislature, we don't have something like the congressional record. Everything is videoed. And so you can go and you can look at the debates on video. Oftentimes the website is not working properly, but you can get it once in a while. The Senate sponsor of the 2022 law says quite explicitly that you can't deny a student a promotion or even a grade. He uses even a grade. So that was what the original law said. In 2023, the revision was, now you don't have to find a court of competent jurisdiction. Every campus is required to have some kind of complaint mechanism that a student can go to complain that he's been forced to conform to a divisive concept. The law that was enacted into law, the bill that was signed into law on April 29th goes one step further, however. If there is a complaint, the university or the school, the college is required to investigate the complaint and then within a designated period of time report the complaint to the state controller. We know why, do we know why it goes to the state controller?
Something about money.
Something about money. I'll get back to the money part. The money part's fun. So you're required to report within a designated time the complaint, the investigation, and the corrective action taken. This year's law goes one step further. It says not only the corrective action taken, but how are you going to prevent future violations of the law. So how do you prevent the teacher from teaching something, basically? The money part, when I went to the first faculty senate, my UT Martin Faculty Senate committee, people said, we use this kind of language, white supremacists, they're going to take our funding. And in fact, you know, thanks for asking about this. In fact, back in 2020, before these laws came into effect, before these laws were thought of, I was part of a fight on my college campus. And the fight was to create a requirement for the study of Black history. If we're talking about challenging white supremacy, I think requiring everybody to take a class in Black history might be helpful. We fought for that, and of course the administration was dead set against it, and never say why, would never open their mouths. We asked our chancellor, I'm sorry, I have to get this dig in. You forgive me. There's part of a gut level kind of thing that all of us have. I think it may not be the greatest thing, but I get perverse pleasure out of it. We asked our chancellor, for example, is it possible to be a responsible citizen in the United States today if you don't understand? If you don't have a significant understanding of Black history? Silence. Refused to answer. And all this was in social media, public media. Call me up, he says. I see a hand back there.
Yeah, I was curious about the effect of these laws on African American teachers and university professors. Are there any organized protests?
Again, I have been unable to find out anything from TSU, but I will answer from my experience in the fight that I just talked about. In the fight that I just talked about, the demand for a requirement for the study of Black history, not a single African American faculty, and we don't have them. I think the number of tenured faculty members out of 300 tenured track faculty members on the campus at UT Martin, 3 tenured faculty, Black faculty members. Not a single Black faculty member spoke for the demand, and I didn't ask. And because I felt like these people have had a different path to the position that they're in than I've had, and I'm not going to ask them to support it. I will say this, however, and this is, I'm sorry, I'll just speak for myself. My memory is not as good as it used to be. There were some Black faculty members who put forward an alternative proposal. And this goes to your question, then what I forgot to answer. And the alternative proposal was not a requirement for the study of Black history, but a proposal for the study of diverse cultures in the United States. So not just Black history, but many. And I think the administration might have had a hand in pushing that forward a little bit. It got into the Faculty Senate, into the Faculty Senate Committee, and in the Faculty Senate Committee, there was some confusion. It was going to be evaluated in the spring of it must have been the spring of 2021. And yes, it was spring of 2021. It was going to be evaluated, but there were two different proposals, and so they said, all right, let's put it off to the fall. Over the summer of 2021, the higher education version of the law was pre-filed in Nashville. And the University of Tennessee called up our chancellor and said, if that divisive concept, diverse cultures requirement goes through, you will lose funding. And the proposal mysteriously disappeared. That's what I wanted to get at.
What happens if you don't teach concepts or theories, but you simply present historical facts? Can you get away with that?
Good question. Again, this is what I'm saying. Number 6 there, not 6. F. Number F. Letter F. If I just present the facts of a lynching, University of Tennessee Martin is about 50 miles north of Dyersburg, Tennessee. In the year 1917, a man named Lation Scott, and I'm not going to go through why he was lynched. It was, anybody who looks at the story that appears in the paper understands immediately that the story of why he was lynched was not why he was lynched. But he was taken out, he was chained, they stuck an axle from a railroad car, the axle that holds the wheels of the rail. They stuck that, they put it really deep in the ground, and they chained him arms and legs around the axle, and they surrounded him with flammable material. It gets worse. And while they keep the fire deliberately low,
Fire?
yes, they take the flammable material surrounding him. They keep it deliberately low. It takes 3 hours before he's dead. But they keep the fire deliberately low. But while he is slowly roasting, they take flat irons. And they put those in the fire. And they brand his back. I'm just telling you the facts. They take a fireplace poker. They heat the fireplace poker up till it's red hot. They gouge his eyes out.
So here you're providing the facts.
I'm just providing the facts. Is somebody going to feel uncomfortable? I sure hope that they do.
But can you do that and not be in danger of?
Not according to this. Somebody's going to be uncomfortable, they're discomforted. Oh, and I forgot to tell you the rest of the story, as is often the case when it comes to my memory. Somewhere in the nature of 8,000 people witnessed.
Please use the mic.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry. Something in the nature of 8,000 people watched. It was a Sunday. Sunday school was letting out. The Sunday school kids walking by. People not in the immediate surrounding of where he would, could not, the only way that they knew something was going on was the smell of burning flesh. So, yeah, I mean, There's one story I read about this. Parents were hoisting their children on their necks to watch. And so, yes, individuals should feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, etc.
I want to say that I'm aware that there are even elementary school teachers concerned about these laws. And for example, somebody teaching history or social studies is much more concerned than an art teacher. I know from individuals I know whom I'm acquainted with about this.
No, it's true, and as the case of Matthew Horn testifies, you can be fired. You can be fired for teaching any of this stuff in a K-12 school. Any other questions?
So, do any of us feel uncomfortable? Thank you, and if you want to talk personally with David, feel free. If you are eager to move on, feeling totally uncomfortable, feel free, Cindy.
I just want to know how we're going to get more details about July 8th.
Okay,
Please.
so let me just ask, how many people here would, and is this really Kingsport?
Kingsport.
Because that's really close.
No. In Sullivan County.
Oh, but
All
they're-
the way over.
Huh.
Northeast Tennessee.
Right, but
Yes.
isn't there a Kingsport just down the road, too? Kingston, thank you. All right, so look up how far it is we'd have to go. And what time is this? And,
Those details are still working out.
okay, but you could email me.
I can email you, and you know what? Anybody who's interested, if you would give me your name and email, I will email everybody.
And if we'd been a month down the road, you could have all watched the Zoom telling Matthew Hahn's story. It's been 3 years since he was dismissed, and he chose to protest. Now, you're a court, are you going to pick the school board or an individual teacher? The protesting's not going so well, right?
Yes, it is not going.
Anyway, I'm going to pass a paper around that you can put your name and email, whatever, if you want to continue to get information about efforts to deal with this. And yeah, go home and put July 8th on your calendar so 6 other things don't fill it up, and we'll see. And if you want to speak more with David, feel free to stick around, but thank you very much for coming. It doesn't appear that we're going to be able to solve free speech in Tennessee soon, does it?
But to stand up on July 8th is to strike a blow for freedom of speech and a blow against white supremacy too, these white supremacist laws. And it would be wonderful to see a bunch of you guys there on July 8th.
Why don't you email people how this GoFundMe works? That could be way easier than going to Kingsport in July.
All right, if you're on Facebook, you type in Matthew Hawn, H-A-W-N, GoFundMe. It'll come up. And, or if you put your email, if you give me your email, I can send you the information directly. But ladies and gentlemen, seriously, what's going to have an impact is people being there. And I know that we are all, myself included, getting older. And it's difficult, more and more difficult for me to get around. And from the appearance, it looks like I'm not alone. So but then that's testimony too, that if we have a bunch of older people there, that they think it's important enough to put up with a few aches and pains and anxieties as I have.
On the other hand, none of us will lose our job because we show up.
Yes. So that email list is going around here. And like I said, as Barber said, I'm here. So if you guys want to talk, I'm available.